Welcome everyone back to the first official, honor to say that, but first official Parkinson's Policy Podcast. This is where we advocate together to raise awareness and advocate and advance meaningful policy for the Parkinson's community. From Washington, D.C., at the Capitol in the U.S., and beyond, we bring together senators, representatives, researchers, and advocates to amplify the voices of people living with Parkinson's disease today and their families. My name is Dr. George Ackerman. I'm a CEO or founder of TogetherForSharon, joined with my co-host Margaret Preston, president of Power Over Parkinson's, and we just together want to welcome you all. Thank you for joining us today, and really excited for really the first show, which is pretty amazing to say.
Yeah. Well, I am so excited to introduce our inaugural guest, State Representative Kyle Mullins. He was elected to the Pennsylvania House of Representatives in 2018 and serves as resident of the 112th Legislative District in Lackawanna County. Mullins made the decision to pursue public office for a few simple reasons: to make his community a better place to live, work, and raise a family. As state representative, Mullins' legislative priorities are rooted in three critical areas: strengthening communities, protecting hardworking families, and reforming state government. And most notably, and as it pertains to our show, Representative Mullins believes that citizens deserve to breathe clean air and drink clean water, which is, of course, on the forefront now. And we're so appreciative of his emphasis on this. And they also deserve to know that their leaders are standing up for both of these things. He also understands that we must strengthen programs that benefit older Pennsylvanians. In addition, Representative Mullins secured a $5 million research funding for neurodegenerative disease that'll award various research grants to qualifying institutions in Pennsylvania. So, Representative Mullins, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Margaret and Dr. Ackerman. I really appreciate it's an honor to be have the chance to be on your podcast, to be with both of you, and on the inaugural one. On top of that, so I feel I feel doubly privileged today.
Well, you're a real incredible voice to the Parkinson's community countrywide, and we were wondering, how can individuals also, join this fight, support you in all the work that you're doing, because again, we need every voice in this fight toward a cure.
Sure, and that's a really great question, because without advocacy, without strong supporters out there in our community, any of these efforts at the state legislative level or at the federal level in support of the Parkinson's community or others with neurodegenerative diseases and their families, none of these efforts would be possible without, organizations, individuals, advocacy opportunities at our state capitals. If there is that chance to go with the Michael J. Fox Foundation or the Together for Sharon group, or in my case, which I'll share in a little bit, the ALS Association or the Alzheimer's Association, they all have very active chapters in each of our states and throughout our country, trying to advocate for not just better care services and supports for those suffering with those diseases and their families, but also for research funding so we could unlock the cruel mysteries behind these degenerative diseases.
Absolutely. I wanted to touch on, because we know neurodegenerative diseases are on a rise, unfortunately. I wanted to touch on it and gain your thoughts as to how we can propel local, state, and federal funding to really support those living with the disease, those in the future who could potentially have disease, and of course the care partners involved. So how can we at every level kind of create a little bit more awareness and funding?
Sure. And I have to give ample credit. You mentioned our recent state budget win here in Pennsylvania for neurodegenerative disease research at the $5 million mark. But the credit is due to actually a measure out in Minnesota a number of years ago. A state senator there who was beloved on both sides of the political aisle was diagnosed with declined from and ultimately passed away from ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. The terrible neurodegenerative disease that robs your ability to speak and to swallow, to walk, and ultimately to breathe. But while he was still in office, he and his fellow legislators and Governor Walz enacted a $25 million ALS support appropriation, 5 of which would go to care services, 20 of which would be eligible for grant funding, for research funding toward that effort. So this was right in the middle of my path. My father was diagnosed with ALS, the same disease I described, in early 2020, and passed away in October of 2022. And I was I was pursuing my 3rd term, and it was through that time, through that decline, and knowing what was on the horizon, knowing that these diseases set a timer, a clock, because they are without cures and therapies. I knew that I had to put my pain and my fear into purpose. And so, I became aware of Minnesota's effort, and I said, why aren't we doing that in Pennsylvania? We have some of the best research institutions, world-class researchers throughout our state. And I know the same is true in so many other states across our country. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we funding and supporting neurodegenerative disease research here? Because at the federal level, you have NIH funding and some others, but that funding has always been extremely limited, very competitive. So research teams aren't always guaranteed sufficient or timely funds to keep their operations moving forward. So I thought, what, we shouldn't rely solely on the uncertainties, especially now, of the federal budgeting process or federal programs. We should be putting our money where our mouth is at the state level. And so a long way around to your initial question is, let's take perhaps the model of what we were recently accomplished here in Pennsylvania, as well as what they did in Minnesota, and spread the good word, empower other states to do just what we did.
Well, we send our love and support to you and your family, and of course, we want to cure for all diseases. This specifically, is on PD, but ALS. Can I also ask your father's name?
Yeah, Mike.
Mike. So hopefully, with your permission, we'd like to dedicate today's show in his memory, because I don't feel, and Margaret, I believe, will agree, that we never forget anyone lost to any of these diseases. And again, so grateful for all that you do, and an opposite, and congratulations on passing the legislation. The money, I know, will go to incredible ways to change so many lives, and also for the future as we move forward, because Parkinson's disease, again, I hate to say it, it's the only thing I really don't like saying, but it's one of the fastest, if not the fastest, rising neurological disorder, not just in the U.S., but in the world. What do you think, in your view and your experience, we can do as a country to start truly assessing potential causes and creating greater awareness for both those impacted and those who have not yet, like our children, have been impacted by the disease?
Right. These diseases, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, ALS, Huntington's, they are also elusive and are maddeningly so, as far as tracking down and nailing down those causes. I know for a host of these diseases, those who have experienced trauma or high stress, or were in military service, or first responders, have an even higher incidence rate of being diagnosed with one of these diseases. So I recently had a chance to tour a research lab for the first time ever. You know, when you think of researchers and you think of research departments, it is these incredibly talented and smart people, but strangers who you'll never get to meet, or you think you'll never be able to personally thank them for the work they're doing to indirectly try to save my dad's life, or your mom's life, or Margaret, your dad's life. But it was so special to get to visit with those researchers at the University of Pittsburgh a little bit before Christmas, and see and get to witness the research going on into Parkinson's. And then the very next office was Alzheimer's, and then down the line, the governor and I toured through and met some of the, I call them rock stars, who are just trying to fight these diseases. And I know it's not just University of Pittsburgh, that model and that dedication of those talented strangers, genius and empathetic ones at that, are across our country, trying to get to the bottom of what causes these things, what could we be doing better as a country to prevent them, but at the same time to treat and make these diseases livable or survivable, not have them be essentially a fatal diagnosis with an indeterminate timer set when the doctor comes in the office.
The way you described the disease shows your acute awareness. I've never heard it described in such a way that's elusive, maddening, and it really sets a clock. And I'm so appreciative of those adjectives and descriptions of what it means to have a disease like this that does not have a cure. So again, it just notes that you're acutely aware of this, and it kind of dovetails really nicely into my question regarding care partner burden. As you know, George and I know what it's like to care for someone with a neurodegenerative disease, as do you. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your thoughts on how we mitigate those who are taking care of those with a neurodegenerative disease. We all know there's a burden associated with that, burden, burnout, etc. And we're not just talking financial burden, but also a mental health aspect as well. So how can we as a nation kind of start dipping our toe into waters where we really need to create a more comprehensive care partner support program across the nation, because these diseases are on the rise?
That's such a great question. And it speaks to my heart as a son whose heart was broken watching my father decline, and who in a separate way, it felt just as badly and heartbroken watching my mother care for, and also at the same time deal with that anticipatory grief. And also it speaks to my heart as a public official, knowing that at a macro level, we need to be doing far better as far as policy and, most importantly, funding goes on behalf of the care services industry, making sure that not only do the live-in related spousal or family member caregivers, not only to make sure that they have the adequate supports, both physically in person, to make sure that there is affordability around the cost of the equipment that is needed to support your loved ones, ramps, wheelchairs, eye gaze and other communication technology, but also those social work and mental wellness supports for our in-home caregivers. And then let's also talk about how we need to be doing a far better job, both at the state funding and federal funding level, of showing how much we ought to be honoring the profession, the calling of those people who go into these very difficult, strenuous, physically and emotionally demanding jobs of caring for people, of helping to lift people, of getting people to and from the bathroom, getting them bathed, whether it's in a care facility setting or at home. We need to be doing a far better job to make that as affordable and dignified as possible. So often in government, the answer to a question be most narrowed down to funding. But if that's what it takes, that's what we should be prioritizing as government leaders, as budget makers. We need to be attracting and retaining those who feel a calling to do something, an incredibly difficult job. So we still have our work cut out for us.
As we wrap up today, and of course the show doesn't end after we all log off, it has to continue the conversation. You've had the honor, I believe you've mentioned earlier, to work with some great foundations. I was wondering if you could touch on that, but also even more importantly, how can residents or all of us out there also support the work you're doing, not just going out there on our own, which is great too, but I feel that with leaders and individuals like yourself, really voicing for all of us these topics and these incredible policies, what can we all do to also support you to continue to do this incredible work?
Thank you. I think it's important that people know whether you are whether you love someone dealing with one of these diseases, or you are simply in a place in a position that you just want to help. You know a neighbor going through a dementia-related disorder or Parkinson's or ALS, and these advocacy organizations that I mentioned come to the Capitol and do real incredible work advocating on behalf of those who count on them. TogetherForSharon, the Michael J. Fox Foundation, the ALS Association, the Alzheimer's Association. When they advocate, they are doing more than just advocating for funding for research. They are directly advocating for, and are available to families as a resource. You can find, and I encourage anybody who is dealing with one of these terrible diseases to reach out to these advocacy organizations and see what's available. I know in our experience, we were able to get a grant for a wheelchair through Team Gleason. There are those sources out there for very expensive equipment, care equipment. It just takes a little bit of research and getting out there in the community, and oftentimes being your own best advocate. That is a responsibility that people like the three of us and so many beyond here have, to make sure that we are spreading that word of trying to fund research, but in the meanwhile, and in the more immediate, there are resources to help you and your family right now to lead a dignified life and really be supported in your battle with whatever you're going through.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for your time, Representative, and also, of course, my incredible co-host for helping us bring this all together. And I wanted to send the show to Margaret for any last minute wrap up.
Yeah, Representative Mullins, we just want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Oftentimes, as the three of us in this on this call can attest to, it takes a personal situation to be a true driver. So I think we're certainly united in that mission, but I think there's so many else beyond this call, as you noted, who are passionate and when to find out where to go. And as you've noted, the Michael J. Fox Foundation, Parkinson's Foundation, of course, smaller organizations such as ours in Central Virginia, TogetherForSharon, who is now a nonprofit as well. So, we definitely encourage those folks who do want to take action, as the three of us have, to just, go for it, because it's going to take collective voices. So Representative Mullins, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And I always want to end the show with the friendly, loving challenge to everyone listening to not just support the representative, but also share the show. It's really important that we get everyone's voice involved. It's not just about us. We truly need everyone in this fight toward a cure, and to find research to slow the progression, stop the progression, and also, of course, never forget those who lost their battle due to Parkinson's. I want to send our love to everyone and thank you for your support. This has been, again, the first and last time I can say the first ever episode of the Parkinson's Policy Podcast, where we advocate together to raise awareness and advance meaningful policy for the Parkinson's community. Thank you again, Representative. Thank you, Margaret. And we'll see everyone soon. Thanks, everyone.